G'day guys, welcome back to another tipping video on the channel. Today I'll be going through my round 12 predictions and also going through what occurred in round 11. So yeah, let's get straight into it. And the opening game of last round was Carlton taking on Sydney at the SCG. And I unfortunately went for the Blues. Very, very upset with that. Obviously not a great result. Sydney getting the job done there. And then the start of the Saturday, a strange Saturday, full of upsets. The first, I tipped St Kilda, Hawthorn got the job done in that one. And then I tipped Nam, and unfortunately Walyup got the job done. And arguably one of the biggest ones of them all, Geelong losing to GWS down at the Cattery. What a loss that is for Geelong. Who would have predicted that one? And Gold Coast pulling off a bit of a stunner up in Darwin against the Dogs. And then finally, a tip correct in the Dons, pretty easily getting the job done over the Eagles, as most people would expect. And then moving into the Sunday, pretty happy with the Sunday tips. Managed to tip Port Adelaide correctly, or Yarrapulti, over the Tigers. Pretty happy with the Pies game over the Roos, and the Crows actually getting that tip correct, which I was pretty happy with. Seeming round of upsets. Surely this one could occur for me, and it did. So I was pretty happy with that. So that's 4 out of 9 tips, which is obviously horrible. Definitely my worst of the year. My big calls, it didn't get much better, that's for sure. The first game I predicted Mackay and Curnow. They combined for 7 goals, and they kicked 1 goal 6. So it could have been possible if they could just kick straight. But, gee, there's a lot going wrong with Carlton at the moment. And then in Hawthorn versus St Kilda, I predicted the Saints to kick, King to kick 4 more goals, and he managed to kick 4, pretty early actually in the game, so I was fairly happy with that call. And then Nam versus Walyup, I predicted Walyup to record 25 more tackles than the Dees, and the Dees recorded 1 more than Walyup, so got that one incorrect. Then Geelong versus GWS, I said a combined score of 50 scoring shots would be combined in the game. And I reckon there was just over 30, so not great there. And again, this one was pretty bad. I predicted for the Darwin clash between the Suns and the Dogs, a combined score of 130 points or less will be scored. And yeah, that was a long way off it. So again, not too great. And then Essendon versus West Coast, I predicted 5 players from the Dons to have 100 or more fantasy points. And I believe 3 did in Redmond, Merritt, and Nick Martin. And Port Adelaide versus Richmond, or Yarrapulti versus Richmond, I predicted Rosie and Butters to combine for 70 or more disposals and 3 or more goals. This was always going to be tricky. And when you look at the goals, Butters kicked 1, Rosie didn't kick any. So immediately knew that the big call was incorrect. Pretty happy with this one though, seeming it was a good result for Collingwood. I predicted North to go goalless in any quarter, and that was correct. They did not kick a goal in the first quarter, kicking 3 behind to believe. And in Adelaide versus Brisbane, I predicted Adelaide to have score 5 first quarter goals. That was always going to be a challenge, especially against Brisbane. And yeah, that was a pretty big fail. So getting 2 out of 9 big calls there, which seeming how much tips I got, that's actually a decent little score there for my big calls. But yeah, horrible round. And yeah, let's move into round 12 and my predictions for round 12. The first of the bye rounds, and the opening clash will be Melbourne versus Carlton on the big Friday night lights of the MCG. Now, Carlton, they were absolutely atrocious last weekend against the Swans. They had a really, really bad last 7 weeks. Obviously, apart from the West Coast game, they've been really, really bad. Mackay and Curnow just can't kick at the goals at the moment. That's what they need to nail the Blues. They're kicking not just in front of goal, but all around the ground. Their kicking has been horrible recently. Mackay and Curnow, they just need to get their set shots right. Mackay's starting to go with the drop punt, but he hasn't been able to actually nail one really yet. He didn't manage to kick any goals, I believe, against Sydney. So, yeah, he was definitely the more inaccurate of the two, and he has to get some work done. They've also got some injury blows. Nick Newman out injured. He's certainly out, ruled out with a hamstring. Hollands has done like a collarbone or an elbow or something like that, so that's disappointing for the youngster. Paddy Cripps might miss, possibly. Not 100% sure though. Hewitt's got concussion, and Cherry's fighting right now, currently in the tribunal, to get his dangerous tackle overturned. So that's 5 big players for Carlton that are all in their best 22 or 23 that will miss out for this clash. Melbourne, they were pretty ordinary last week, I have to say, against Walyup, especially in that second half. Walyup just looked like the completely better side and just ran over the top of them in that second half. The first half, though, they were pretty competitive, like the second half against Yarrapulti the week before. But yeah, just not a great last couple of weeks for the Dees. You look at the teams that they've beaten this season; they've all been outside the 8, except the Bulldogs. But the Bulldogs were out of form then, so you can't really say much. And all their losses have been to top 8 teams and Walyup, who aren't in the top 8 at the current minute, but they're certainly pushing, that's for sure. So they've got a lot of work to do, Melbourne. Yeah, there was a few rare players that were actually alright in that game, but they've definitely got a lot of work to do. I'm going to go Melbourne, though, because of Carlton's horrible form by 47 points. Hopefully they can get it done for me. My big call, Carlton kick 5 more behinds than goals. They've been so inaccurate of late that I feel like this might be an easy big call. And then I've got a pretty interesting Saturday ahead of us. The first game is Port Adelaide taking on Hawthorn. Should be an absolute cracker in my opinion. Hawthorn are coming off some pretty good form. Obviously a 100-point win to West Coast and an upset win against the Saints. They're carrying in some good momentum, and you never know with Mitch Lewis kicking bags in front of goals and their midfield really starting to control games. You never know. James Sicily was phenomenal last week. Definitely the best individual player game of the season. Unfortunately, he's been suspended. They're not going to bother arguing his case in the tribunal, meaning he will miss out for this game, which is unfortunate because he definitely polled 3 votes last week and he's been very good for them this season, their captain. And for Port Adelaide or Yarrapulti, just a bit of a sloppy win against Richmond at the G, really. Obviously, coming into the game, they'd lost that game at the start of the season by quite a bit as well to Collingwood. So they would have come into the game with pretty much full of nerves. But they were able to get it done. You know, Butters was good. There's a few interesting position changes. Burton going back to defence and playing on an interesting player, and Samson Ryan and Dusty switching between the two. I found that interesting. Bergman going forward, which is just not right. And there's a few other changes that definitely didn't really suit their game style. Not really their best footy, that's for sure. They were pretty sloppy in front of goal as well, like most teams on the weekend. 10 goals, 17 now, I believe. So they've got to fix that as well. But they should win this game. I'm going to go pretty comfortably. Like, I do think Hawthorn will challenge, and I do think it'll be a good game. I reckon Port will win it by 26 points. My big call, Finlayson kicks 4 or more goals, though he has been pretty inaccurate this season, so hopefully he can get that done, especially of late as well. And then we've got a very, very interesting clash, and I don't want to say it's going to be a smashing, because obviously it should be, but I don't know. It's West Coast versus Collingwood at Optus Stadium. Now, West Coast have just had a dynamic, disastrous season. This has been phenomenally bad, really. I can't believe how bad their season's going. It's just getting worse and worse by the week, really. Getting more injuries. I think they lost a player, Luke Edwards, I believe, on the Saturday night clash on the weekend between the Bombers. Yeah, it was just a game that they were just expected to lose, and they were probably expected to lose by more in the end, so you can argue they were actually alright. There are a few players here and there that were good, you know, Tim Kelly, Oscar Allen kicking a few more goals to his tally, Jaden Hunt, Tim Kelly, Andrew Gaff, Dom Sheed, but apart from that, not much right for West Coast, and there's not really that much to speak about West Coast. They've just been horrible, and Adam Simpson's under all sorts of pressure. And now Collingwood, just a pretty ordinary win, I guess, against North. One that everyone was expecting, probably expecting to be a little bit more. North challenged us, that's for sure. They were pretty good actually on the day, but we're just able to get the job done. Now, obviously, we all know what happened to Sidebottom in his 300 game, just disastrous. He should miss minimum a month, so that's bit of a blow for us, and we've got heaps of sickness going through, especially today. We've got a bad illness. That the club doesn't even know what the illness is, but a few players do have it, so it's not great. Hopefully, they will get a good best 22 up, basically the best 22 that we fielded last week, excluding Sidebottom. And yeah, look, got to go safe here. Collingwood by 38 points. My big call, mihocek and Allen combined for 6 or more goals. We all know what happened last year, though, and I do not want it to happen again. Now, the Western Bulldogs are taking on the Cats on Saturday night at Marvel. Now, if it was at the Cattery, it would have been a little bit of a different question. Dangerfield's pushing to come back, which definitely does prove for the Cats, but at the moment, they've got injuries, and their depth is just not doing its job, I guess. Everyone expected Geelong's depth to be a little bit better this season, but they've got a few fringe players that are in the team at the moment. They've got a few players that just aren't performing, and they've got a few players out of form. And when you really look at their list, and especially on that game on the weekend against the Giants, the only real players that were stepping up were Tom Stewart in defence, which was the only reason why is because he's taking the kickouts and Rudder before he got injured, which is just an amazing, disastrous blow for Geelong when you thought it couldn't get any worse. Asava Rudder was definitely their best player in that game before he went out, and to be honest, they probably could have even won the game if he stayed in. But yeah, bit of a blow there, and yeah, you'd expect he'd miss with a little bit of a tightness in his hammy. And the Dogs, well, Treloar could be coming back this week, which is a positive to that midfield. A midfield that was beaten, I want to say, for the majority of that game against Gold Coast. They did start pretty well. Everyone thought, oh, here we go. It's going to be a dog smashing to continue their good run up in Darwin. But no, the Suns pretty much dominated the rest of the game after that. The Dogs just couldn't really get much firing in their forward line, which is not great, seeming their forward line's been pretty good this year. Their defence did stand up again, but at times, in the clutch moments, I guess, in the second half, it didn't really step up, which is a little bit unfortunate for them. Yeah, their midfield was pretty much beaten, apart from Bontempelli, who was dominant again, as he has been all season. So Treloar coming back into that midfield would be a nice refresher for them. And yeah, look, not too much to take out of the game for Bevo. I think he's just going to move on to this clash. A clash that I can see them winning. I guess you can call it a bit of an upset, really. Not really, seeming it's at Marvel. Geelong's form has been absolutely shocking. Go to Dogs by 16 points. My big call, the Dogs kick 4 first quarter goals like they did early on against the Suns. Now, speaking of the Suns, they're taking on the Crows up in Darwin again, so back-to-back games in Darwin for the Crows. It's also Isaac Rankin's first game against his former club, expecting big things out of this one. Now, look, I guess you just expect lots of things to go right for the Crows in this one. The Suns were very, very good on the weekend, though. Definitely one of their more impressive games of the season so far. You know, you got a few things that definitely weren't great, that's for sure. But a few things that definitely worked their way. They didn't start too well. Lukosius was sensational. Kicked 5 goals. Kicked 3, all from the square, funny enough, in that second quarter. He was definitely a big reason why they got over the line. Matt Rowell, Noah Anderson, Bailey Humphrey has been really, really impressive, especially in the last 4 weeks, the young kid for them in the midfield. Charlie Ballard's having a sensational year in defence, pretty underrated one, definitely in the mix for All-Australian. And yeah, just their forward line able to get the job done, and their defence standing up when needed to in the clutch moments. So, yeah, positives for them. The Crows, again, they're starting to make Adelaide Oval a fortress now. Tex and Phil Thorpe back definitely helped. You could definitely tell early on that their forward line just looked much better with them both. Phil Thorpe definitely helped the structure, and Tex just kicking goals as you'd expect Tex to do. And Rashili and Rankin definitely looked a lot better and definitely responded after their poor clash against the Dogs. Their midfield was back to their best. Dawson was brilliant. Laird, Sloan. Laird has actually been suspended for a dangerous tackle, so if he does miss, that's a bit of a blow. And yeah, their defence, well, was pretty good again. Brisbane were pretty inaccurate in that one though, but they were able to take control of the game when they had the momentum, and that's why they won the game. Now, look, realistically, they should win this game, which should be pretty easy. Crows by 12 points, and a bit of another Darwin thriller. And my big call: both teams kick more behinds than total goals. So yeah. Next, we got GWS versus Richmond. On the Sunday. Should be very, very interesting. That's for sure. Especially it's at Giant Stadium. Now Richmond under their new interim coach, Andrew McQualter. Now everyone thought that they're under an interim coach. Maybe they can pull off one of the upsets. What interim coaches are capable of doing. But unfortunately, it wasn't the case. The only real shine player was yet again Tim Torano, who's, I have to say, probably one of the favourites for the Brownlow now. He's having a sensational season. Got over 35 disposals, 4 goals. Sensational again. But yeah, just a few moments where Port Adelaide stepped up. There was a few moments where they definitely were better than Port Adelaide. But a scrappy game like that, it's pretty difficult to tell. GWS were very, very good against Geelong on the weekend, especially down at Coniglio. They definitely did it for Toby Green in that one for his 200th game. They definitely played it for him. Toby Green was sensational himself in the first half, kicking 4 out of the 9 goals combined in the first half. He was sensational. Kelly, Coniglio, Green, their midfielders got to work. Their defence did a very, very good job, especially on Hawkins and Cameron, both Buckley and Iden, stepping up in that bit of an undermanned defence. And yeah, just a great win for the Giants. A win that keeps them, possibly a chance for finals. And I'm actually going to tip them here by 15 points. My big call, Kelly and Coniglio combined for 65 or more touches. Now, the final game of the round is North Melbourne versus Essendon. I'm not going to speak about this one too much, really. North, look, again, another loss. Nick Larkey was definitely the positive out of it, kicking 5 goals. Their midfield was actually very good. Goldstein, Greenwood, Phillips, the future of North's midfield actually stood up in that one. But yeah, just some poor kicking in defence really, really let them down. Now for Essendon, just pretty much a complete game. Langford was good again. Their midfield obviously got on top of West Coast pretty quickly. Their defence was pretty solid when West Coast had opportunities to score. And yeah, just another complete game for Essendon. Not much to really speak about there. You see, I tipped them by 47 points in this one. My big call, Langford kicks 4 or more goals. Now, the buys is this week, it's Sydney, Brisbane, St Kilda, and Fremantle. Now, Brisbane, they weren't great last week, so a buy is definitely refreshing for them. They definitely need a refresh. Obviously, they had the 7 wins coming into the game against Adelaide. But yeah, Adelaide have turned that ground into a fortress. Not much really to take out of it. Poor inaccuracy. Didn't really capitalise when they had the momentum like most teams did this weekend, to be honest. And Sydney, yeah, look, it's just a win that you got to take, I guess. Look, not much you can really say about it. Nick Blakey was sensational defence, especially in that last quarter. 6 or 7 intercepts it was. It was just sensational. Isaac Heaney's little move to the midfield definitely sparked their midfield up a little bit, and hopefully it's regenerated something for him this season, seeming he's had a pretty disappointing season. And now Paddy McCartan's been ruled out for the rest of the season. Their defence blows. They just need some defenders back, so I think Dane Rampy's back after the bye, which should help their defence out a bit. St Kilda, shock loss against Hawthorn. They need to regroup. They need to rethink itself because the season is starting to look similar to last year's, and we all know how that happened. And the big thing was for them after their bye round, I think, or maybe it was before, they got absolutely belted by Sydney, and that ruined their season. And they've got Sydney straight after the bye, so they've got to prepare for that game. Max King was very, very good on the weekend, but apart from that, their midfield clearly lost the battle. Hawthorn were pretty inaccurate at stages, which definitely helped them out. But yeah, they just need to regroup and rethink themselves after a bit of a disappointing loss. And Fremantle, well, they were pretty happy with their win, and they've been on a winning streak. So this bye is actually really, really bad for Freo. And apart from the 3 other teams I've mentioned, This is actually a bye that Fremantle would not want because they've got all sorts of momentum. They've got crazy momentum. You look at their last 2 games. They've beaten Geelong and Melbourne. Fantastic for them. And they got 2 pretty good wins the weeks before over Hawthorn and Sydney. So they've really revived their season here, Freo. And I think they're only a few points or maybe even percentage-wise out of the 8 at the minute. So this is actually a really bad bye for them. But that's all right. They kind of need the bye too because Sean Darcy's now out injured in a massive blow. It's definitely going to affect their team. Though Luke Jackson was sensational against his former team on the weekend. Lockie Schultz in the last 2 weeks has been sensational. Frederick, Amos got the rising star nom, kicked 3 goals. Again, he's in good form. So this is a really bad bye for Freo. So yeah, hopefully I can do a little bit better this week. We all know what happened last week. 4 out of 9, round of upsets, round of everything crazy really. But yeah, only the 7 games, so hopefully I can get all 7 tips and 7 big calls. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for my tipping video next week.